Have you ever wondered why some men leave such a lasting impression on women, while others are completely forgotten? Imagine this. Two men approach the same woman at a social gathering. Both are similarly attractive, well-dressed, and successful. Yet hours later, she can only remember one of them clearly. Days later, she finds herself thinking about him, while the other has faded from memory entirely. What made the difference? Today, I'm going to reveal a powerful truth that most men never discover. A simple phrase, really a way of being, that makes you unforgettable to the women you meet. This isn't about pickup lines or manipulation tactics. It's about something much deeper, something rooted in ancient wisdom that has stood the test of time. But first, let me tell you about Michael. Michael was what most would consider a nice guy. Good job, decent apartment, always polite and accommodating. He bent over backwards to please the women he dated. Compliments flowed freely. He'd change his plans at a moment's notice if a date called. He'd agree with everything she said, laugh at every joke, and make himself constantly available. And yet, Michael remained perpetually single. Women would go out with him once, maybe twice, then suddenly become too busy for a third date. His texts would go unanswered. He couldn't understand what he was doing wrong. I met Michael at a coffee shop one morning. He looked defeated, staring into his cup as if searching for answers in the coffee grounds. When I asked him what was wrong, the story came pouring out. Another woman, another disappointment, another instance of initial interest that quickly faded to indifference. "I don't get it," he said. "I do everything right. I'm attentive. I'm generous. I'm always there when they need me. Why don't they see my value?" His question lingered in the air between us. I could have given him the standard advice: be more confident, dress better, learn better conversation skills. But I knew those wouldn't address the root of his problem. Instead, I told him about James. James wasn't born with natural charisma. He wasn't wealthy or extraordinarily handsome. In fact, in many ways, he was quite ordinary. But there was something extraordinary about how women responded to him. They remembered him. They sought him out. They valued his attention in a way they never did with men like Michael. I first noticed this at a friend's wedding. James arrived alone, knew almost no one, yet by the end of the night, several women had given him their contact information, not because he was aggressively pursuing them, but because they were drawn to something in his demeanor, something that made them want to know more. What was his secret? James had discovered the power of a specific mindset, one that's been practiced by some of history's greatest philosophers and leaders, a mindset that modern society has largely forgotten, yet speaks to something primal in human nature. This mindset is rooted in Stoicism, an ancient Greek philosophy that teaches emotional resilience, self-mastery, and inner strength. And while it wasn't created as a dating strategy, its principles have profound effects on how women perceive and remember men. So, what exactly do these men say? What's the phrase that makes such a difference? Actually, it's not just what they say, it's how they live. But if I had to distill it into words, it would be this: I value you, but I don't need you to be complete. Let that sink in for a moment. I value you, but I don't need you to be complete. This isn't about being cold or distant, far from it. It's about approaching relationships from a position of wholeness rather than lack. It's about genuinely appreciating a woman's presence in your life while maintaining your own center of gravity. When Michael approached women, his underlying message was, "Please like me. I'll do anything to make you happy. You hold the key to my fulfillment." Even though he never said these words aloud, they seeped through his every action. His excessive texting, his immediate availability, his reluctance to express any opinion that might create conflict. James, on the other hand, communicated through his behavior. My life is rich and meaningful. I see your value, and I'd welcome you into my world if we're compatible, but my happiness doesn't depend on your validation. This is the essence of Stoic attraction, not neediness disguised as kindness, not manipulation disguised as confidence, but genuine self-sufficiency that creates space for authentic connection. The great Stoic philosopher Seneca wrote, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility." Paradoxically, by not making women the sole focus of his happiness, James created the conditions where meaningful connections could flourish. Let me share 5 critical ways this Stoic mindset manifests in everyday interactions. First, men who embody this principle maintain their own interests and friendships. They don't abandon their passions or social circles when they start dating someone. They invite women into their already fulfilling lives rather than making her the center of their universe. I once watched Michael cancel plans with longtime friends because a woman he'd just met asked him to join her for drinks. James, in contrast, once politely declined a date because it conflicted with a commitment he'd made to help a friend move. The woman ended up rescheduling to accommodate his schedule, something that would never happen with Michael. Second, these men express genuine appreciation without excessive flattery. They can admire a woman's beauty, intelligence, or other qualities without putting her on a pedestal. Their compliments come from a place of honest observation rather than desperate attempts to win favor. When Michael complimented a woman, there was an anxious energy behind his words, as if he were offering tribute to a goddess who might either reward or punish him. When James complimented someone, it was delivered as a simple truth, with no expectation attached. The same words could sound entirely different depending on the internal state of the man speaking them. Third, and this is crucial, they're comfortable with silence and solitude. They don't feel compelled to fill every moment with chatter or entertainment. This comfort with silence communicates inner security that women find magnetic. On dates, Michael would nervously fill any conversational lull, afraid that silence meant disinterest or boredom. James would allow these natural pauses, using them as opportunities for genuine connection or simply shared experience. His comfort with silence created space for women to become curious about his thoughts, to wonder what was happening behind those calm eyes. Fourth, they maintain healthy boundaries and aren't afraid to say no. While Michael would rearrange his entire life to accommodate a woman's requests, James had clear limits around his time, energy, and personal values. Rather than driving women away, these boundaries actually increased their respect and interest. I remember watching a woman ask James if he'd drive her home after a party, despite it being far out of his way. Instead of immediately agreeing like most men would, he suggested an alternative that worked better for both of them. She seemed more interested in him after this exchange, not less. Fifth, they embrace their own path without seeking constant validation. These men make decisions based on their values and goals, rather than what they think will impress others. This authenticity is rare in a world where many people are constantly performing for social approval. Now, you might be thinking this sounds like the old play hard to get advice. It's not. Playing games is manipulation. It comes from insecurity. What I'm describing comes from the opposite place, complete security in oneself. The ancient Stoics had a term for this quality, apatheia. Not apathy in the modern sense, but freedom from being controlled by desires and fears. Men who cultivate this quality don't act from desperation or neediness. They act from principles and purpose. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." Men who understand this focus on developing themselves rather than chasing external validation, whether from women or anyone else. Let me give you a concrete example of how this plays out in real life. There was a social gathering where both Michael and James were present. A beautiful woman named Sophia entered the room, and predictably she drew attention from many of the men present. Michael immediately gravitated toward her, offering to get her a drink, complimenting her dress, laughing a bit too enthusiastically at her jokes. He spent the entire evening orbiting her, adjusting his position whenever she moved, like a satellite locked in a gravitational pull. James, meanwhile, greeted her warmly when they were introduced, but continued his conversation with the group he was already engaged with. Later, when they naturally ended up in the same conversation circle, he asked her thoughtful questions and listened intently to her answers. But he also respectfully disagreed with one of her opinions, leading to a spirited but friendly debate. When Sophia mentioned an interest in photography, Michael immediately claimed it was his passion too. It wasn't. James, who knew little about photography, simply expressed curiosity and asked what drew her to that art form. By the end of the night, who do you think Sophia remembered more vividly? Who do you think she was more interested in seeing again? Now, here's where it gets interesting from a psychological perspective. Studies have shown that we remember people who make us feel something strongly. But contrary to what you might expect, it's not always the people who make us feel good that we remember most vividly. Rather, we remember people who trigger emotional peaks and valleys, who create contrast in how we feel. This explains why the nice guy who maintains a pleasant but unchanging emotional state often fades from memory. Dr. Helen Fisher, a biological anthropologist who has studied romantic love extensively, found that uncertainty and variability in another person's interest level can actually intensify romantic feelings. This isn't about playing manipulative games, but about the natural intrigue that comes from interacting with someone who is self-contained rather than desperately seeking approval. The Stoic approach naturally creates this emotional contrast. By not being needy or overly available, by maintaining healthy boundaries, by occasionally saying no, these men create space for desire to grow. They become more, not less, memorable. But here's the twist that most men miss. This approach works not because it's a clever strategy to make women chase you. It works because it represents genuine emotional health and maturity. The truth is that no healthy relationship can thrive when one person needs the other to feel complete. Neediness eventually suffocates love. Independence creates the oxygen necessary for attraction to breathe and grow. I've seen this play out countless times. Men who approach relationships from a place of neediness might occasionally get short-term interest, but it invariably fades. Men who approach from a place of self-contained wholeness create the conditions for sustainable attraction. So the real secret isn't about what to say to make women remember you. It's about becoming the kind of man who naturally leaves an impression because you've done the inner work to develop self-sufficiency. This is where modern dating advice gets it all wrong. It focuses on techniques and tactics rather than genuine personal development. It treats symptoms rather than causes. The Stoics knew better. They understood that external outcomes, including success with women, flow naturally from internal mastery. Epictetus, another great Stoic philosopher who was born a slave and rose to become one of history's most influential thinkers, taught, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." Applied to relationships, this means focusing on becoming your best self rather than trying to control how others perceive you. Ironically, this self-focus, when healthy and balanced, is precisely what makes you most attractive to others. Let me share a powerful exercise that can help develop this Stoic mindset. It's called practicing negative visualization, and it's been used by Stoics for thousands of years to develop resilience and appreciation. Here's how it works in the context of relationships. Take a few moments each day to imagine what your life would be like without romantic partnership. But instead of seeing this as a negative outcome to be feared, approach it with curiosity and openness. What opportunities would this create? What aspects of your life could you develop more fully? How might you find fulfillment and meaning without a romantic partner? This isn't about convincing yourself that you don't want a relationship. It's about removing the desperate need that repels the very connections you're trying to create. It's about developing the emotional resilience to be okay, regardless of your relationship status. Another practical exercise is to regularly engage in activities that you find deeply fulfilling, regardless of whether they're likely to impress women. This builds a life centered on your authentic interests rather than external validation. Paradoxically, this authenticity becomes incredibly attractive to compatible partners. So, what happened to Michael and James? After our coffee shop conversation, Michael was skeptical. The advice ran counter to everything he thought he knew about dating. "So you're telling me that caring less will make women care more?" he asked incredulously. "Not caring less," I clarified. "Needing less. There's a crucial difference." Reluctantly, he began studying Stoicism and working on his self-development. He started building a life that felt meaningful, regardless of his relationship status. He reconnected with old friends and made new ones. He rediscovered his passion for hiking and joined a local club. He set professional goals based on his values rather than external metrics of success. Gradually, he stopped seeing women as the solution to his loneliness. He began enjoying his own company. He deepened his friendships, advanced in his career, and discovered new passions. The transformation wasn't overnight. There were setbacks and moments of doubt. Old habits of neediness would resurface, particularly when he met someone he was especially attracted to. But slowly, steadily, his center of gravity shifted from external validation to internal worth. And something unexpected happened. Women began responding to him differently. The same women who had previously found him forgettable now found reasons to continue conversations with him. His dating life transformed not because he learned new tactics, but because he became a different man. 6 months after our coffee shop conversation, Michael met someone special. Unlike his previous patterns, where he would immediately abandon all other priorities to focus on a new romantic interest, he maintained his balanced life. Their relationship developed naturally, without the desperate energy that had sabotaged his previous attempts at connection. "The weird thing," he told me later, "is that I'm actually being more authentically caring now that I'm not trying so hard to please her. Before, my niceness was really just fear disguised as consideration." James, meanwhile, continued living by Stoic principles, eventually meeting someone who appreciated his self-contained nature. Their relationship flourished precisely because it wasn't built on need or dependency, but on mutual respect and genuine desire. Years later, both men are in fulfilling relationships, but with a crucial difference. Michael had to transform himself to get there. James simply had to be himself. The lesson here is powerful. Women remember men who don't need to be remembered. They remember men who have their own internal compass, who don't bend with every changing wind of approval or disapproval. They remember men who can say with their actions, if not their words, "I value you, but I don't need you to be complete." This isn't just about dating success. It's about living well. It's about cultivating the kind of inner strength that serves you in every area of life. Relationships are simply where this strength becomes most visible and its effects most dramatic. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus wrote, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." Applied to relationships, true relational wealth comes not from having someone who completes you, but from wanting completion so little that you can truly appreciate the people in your life for who they are, not for what they can give you. This Stoic approach also opens up another powerful dimension of attraction, the ability to be present. When you're not constantly worrying about how you're being perceived or whether you're making a good impression, you can actually listen, actually connect. This presence is increasingly rare in our distracted world, and it stands out dramatically. I've seen men transform their entire approach to life through these principles. One particular story stands out. A man who had been divorced and devastated found himself in a cycle of needy relationships that invariably failed. Through practicing Stoic principles, particularly focusing on what was within his control and accepting what wasn't, he rebuilt his life around meaning rather than external validation. 3 years later, he told me, "The irony is that once I truly accepted the possibility of being alone forever, I started attracting people who valued the man I'd become." My new relationship isn't a desperate attempt to fill a void, it's a partnership between two whole people. So, if you're struggling in your interactions with women, stop focusing on what to say or how to act. Instead, ask yourself, am I approaching from a place of wholeness or a place of lack? The answer to that question will determine not just how women respond to you, but how you experience life itself. Because ultimately, the principles of Stoicism that make you memorable to women are the same principles that lead to a life of meaning, resilience, and genuine contentment. And that's the real twist here. The secret to being unforgettable isn't about them at all. It's about you. Let me leave you with a thought exercise. Imagine meeting someone you're intensely attracted to. Now, instead of wondering whether they like you, ask yourself, do I like who I am when I'm with them? Do they bring out my best self? Do I maintain my center in their presence? These questions, focused on your own experience rather than their perception, represent the Stoic approach to attraction and relationships. They put you back in control of what matters most, your own character and happiness. Remember, your worth isn't determined by someone else's response to you. It exists independently of external validation. When you truly understand this, you become magnetic not because you're trying to be, but because authentic self-possession is one of the rarest and most attractive qualities a person can possess. If you found value in this perspective, hit that like button and subscribe for more insights on applying ancient wisdom to modern challenges. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and drop a comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts on how Stoicism has influenced your relationships. Remember, develop yourself first. The rest will follow naturally. And if you want to dive deeper into Stoic principles and how they can transform your life beyond just relationships, check out my other videos on practical applications of philosophy in the modern world. The link is in the description below. Until next time, focus on what you can control, accept what you cannot, and watch how this simple shift transforms not just how women see you, but how you see yourself. Because the man who doesn't need to be remembered is precisely the man no one forgets.